Hey, everybody, this is Nathan Artt with Ministry Solutions and Executive Leadership Solutions. Man, I am so excited for today's conversation with Pastor Mark Batterson. Pastor Mark, welcome.
Hey, Nathan, fun, excited about it. We go back a ways.
We do.
We have walked some paths together. We've dreamed a few things together,
Yes,
had a
sir.
few crazy ideas together. So fun to have a conversation today.
Well, same. And we were talking a little bit offline, but what's really fun is we're going to talk so much about where National is today and some of the great things that have happened. But one of the coolest things is having a chance to walk with your team and you and see a little bit of a glimpse of what it was like before all this happened. And I mean, Pastor Mark, I mean, just give us an idea. We're here to talk about activated spaces and what that could possibly look like. And the story of the Capitol turnaround literally goes all the way back to the Circle Maker. So just tell us a little bit about the story and where this comes from and how you got here today.
Yeah, short version, 1996. Start with a core group of 19 people meeting in a DC public school. Average attendance, 20, 25 people that first year. So don't despise the day of small beginnings. We were meeting in a DC public school cafetorium. Didn't even have air conditioning. And in the summer months, it was brutal. So total income was $2,000 a month. Cost $1,600 to rent the DC public school. That left $400 for our salary, all other expenses. I'm throwing stuff out there at the beginning because we're going to talk about some big numbers, but it's always about two mites. It's about 5 loaves and 2 fish. So we were not self-supporting until year 3, and that's significant. Although we did start giving to missions in year 1. As a principled conviction that God's going to bless us in proportion to how we give to missions and care for the poor in our city. And so fast forward, and we would build a $5 million DC Dream Center in Ward 7 about 5 years ago. But, it started with a $50 check. And for the record, first 15 years, not a single gift, one gift that was over 5 digits. It was a $42,000 gift that, I about had a heart attack because we were 80% single 20 something. We were not bankrolled. So 15 years until one day someone called and said, we want to give a $3 million gift because you have vision beyond your resources. So for the record, don't let your budget determine your vision. Make sure you've got more vision than you have budget. So now to answer the question you actually asked, it was a 1996. I'm reading Joshua 1:3. It says, "I'll give you everywhere you set your foot, just as I promised Moses." And did a 4.7 mile prayer walk. Was just praying a perimeter around Capitol Hill. And you've got to understand. Nathan, the week before, we had 13 people in church, and it was a low point. I was discouraged. We were coming off a failed church plant in the Chicago area, and it felt like round 2. So we were not praying for property. We were praying for people. Fast forward 27 years, and we own 6 properties on that prayer circle, like geographically right on it, including Ebenezer's Coffee House on one corner and the Capitol Turnaround on another. And I just don't think that's coincidence. I think it's providence. I think prayer is how we write history before it happens. And so this is really, our conversation is a testimony to the power of prayer. And so that prayer really paved the way for us. And that was a critical moment. And we'll kind of catch up to ourselves, I'm sure, during our conversation. But that's a little bit of the backstory.
Well, I love it. And to give everybody listening some context, and we'll send you some information on this, but the Capitol turnaround started as possibly the ugliest building on Capitol Hill. I mean, if you, I know, PM, if it's okay. I mean, it's a 74,000 square foot building that looks like one of the White Castle food chains when you first got it, and you also have always had this vision, and it's not one. It's interesting because it's not one that's popular in the church, but it's to have real estate that's activated Monday through Friday in buildings that are as relevant to the community as they are reverent to us. And where does that vision stem from, and how in the world, when you looked at the White Castle, did you see the Capitol turnaround in the future?
Well, vision is seen through drywall and drop ceilings. If you walk into a space and you look at what isn't load bearing and see it as something you can't change, you won't do anything. We knew that this 1891 Navy Yard car barn, which, by the way, was one of the most beautiful buildings in the city when it was built
Yeah.
130 years ago. Then it was in the 1980s that someone decided it would be great to paint a whole city block blue. And so it was called the Blue Castle. And it just, and then they took out windows and put in cinder blocks, and it lost its luster. But we've always felt like Isaiah 58, that we've been called to be a rebuilder of broken walls. And part of that goes back to, a crack house, a dilapidated piece of property that we turned into Ebenezer's
Right.
Coffee House. And we better talk philosophy of ministry for a moment. That, we feel like a church that stays within its four walls is not a church at all, that we're called to the middle of the marketplace. Jesus didn't just hang out in synagogues. He hung out at wells, natural gathering places in ancient culture. And so we felt like a coffee house was a postmodern well where church and community could cross paths. Plus, the Holy Spirit plus caffeine equals awesome. Let's just be honest. I think, we figured some people won't darken a church door, but everybody needs caffeine. So that was kind of our first endeavor at creating a marketplace. And, for a long time, Nathan, we were known as theater church because we were meeting in 7 movie theaters that we didn't own.
Yeah.
We never thought we would own property. And so I think that's important to say right here. And the reason is 27 years ago, property was going for 10 million an acre. And by the way, the price has gone up. On Capitol Hill, within the shadow of the Capitol, like, the cost of doing ministry is unbelievable. You can't even buy a fixer-upper row house for less than $1 million these days. It is what it is. But we also know it'll be worth twice as much in 20 or 30 years. So,
True.
I did not go to seminary to study real estate development, interior design, feng shui, or the psychology of physical spaces. But don't tell me that stuff isn't important, because 12 chapters in the book of Exodus are devoted to the aesthetics of the tabernacle. So this stuff matters. And now I'm riffing, so I don't even remember what we were talking about.
Well, no, I think. Well, let me just ask you this, because again, it's not as though, Pastor Mark, there's a million examples of churches that use their buildings to serve the community in different ways. That's not normal. But you had a vision for that a long time ago, and the Capitol turnaround is simply the result of that vision. What was on your heart? What did you want to accomplish with these spaces, and specifically the Capitol turnaround, that you weren't able to do in some of the other locations that you had?
Yeah, well, it's hard to get your hands on a city block. And for the record, it's actually 100,000 square feet under roof, and it's an acre and a half of roof deck. That why would we dig 109 micropiles 40 feet deep at the cost of $1 million to reinforce the roof structure? Because an acre and a half is worth 25-30 million dollars. So that's just good stewardship. And by the way, I'm not sure we'll build on it. I think we're setting up the next generation. We've got to think in 70-year timelines. It's You got to build houses, plant gardens. That's what Jeremiah said to the exiles in Babylon. So you have to think long. But we saw it as an opportunity for a long play. And, the price tag was 29.3 million, which we didn't even have a category for. But when God gives a vision, he has a way of making provision. And somehow we got the contract. An investment firm offered cash, but we got the property. And I just don't think it's coincidental that it's right on the corner of that prayer circle.
Yeah.
I think God put a contract on it in 1996.
Mm.
So we felt like it provided us a larger opportunity for a larger play. We also knew that we could build it in phases. And that's incredibly appealing from a capital campaign and just a building activation standpoint. So we knew our phase one was to build out an auditorium, but then we also wanted to build it in a way where we could begin to lease that space. And so interesting, we made a branding decision to call it the Capital Turnaround as opposed to National Community Church, which I think some people would hear that and think that that's strange. And in some ways it is. We're not trying to hide who we are, but the name is a tip of the cap to the history of the building because it was the last stop on the streetcar red line. It's where the streetcars were repaired and rerouted and turned around. And so we felt like the turnaround, Capital Turnaround, was a double entendre, a little play on
Sure.
words that we want to do in people's lives what those streetcar mechanics did with streetcars. And so what that means is that this year, and we're just recovering. In DC, we went in a year and 2 weeks where we couldn't gather.
Yeah.
So, that we took a hit, and that was only 9 months into this building, and then we had to be out of it for a year. So we're just getting our footing back under us. But this year we'll host 100 events here. We will revenue stream about $1 million, and we kind of jokingly before we hit record, there are some events that'll come in and rent this space for 2 days, and we will make more in 2 days from that one event rental than our entire first year's income. And now I want to be careful here because I'm a language guy. I write books for a living, and I want to be careful not to, in a sense, we're plundering the Egyptians, and I want to throw that out there and then back off of that and say, yeah, we're making money. I mean, we just had Amazon rent our facility, which is hilarious to me.
Funny.
And they owe it to me. After all the books I've bought on Amazon, they owe us the top rental price. And so when I say plunder the Egyptians, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I'm just referencing this idea that when Israel exited out of Egypt, out of 400 years of slavery, where everything was stripped from them, God found some way to provide for his people. And unfortunately, then they made a golden calf, but that's another sermon for another day with some of the jewelry
Sure.
that they walked away with. But here's the larger point. It's not about revenue streaming. It's about being in the middle of the marketplace where church and community can cross paths. So everybody who walks into the building, and at this point, it's tens of thousands of people that circulate through our space. Oh, I'm going to pastor them. I'm going to love them. Even the people who don't know that they're walking into a building owned by a church, they're going to get loved on. They're going to bump into Jesus, the hands and feet of Jesus, somehow, some way. And so it's kind of that double bottom line of missional and monetary that, I know you talk about, and something that we've thought about as well in terms of, how do you do business as mission? Yeah.
Oh, Pastor Mark, I love it so much. And and it's interesting because mission and monetization don't have to be in conflict. I mean, money's a great servant to ministry, and I mean, you could probably tell me what $1 million of extra money has done to providing salaries and other benefits, but um,
Can I give you one example?
please, yes.
Because to me, it's all about generosity.
Hmm,
Like it's leveraging the ability to give things away. So we recently in a house of prayer, you can probably see the
yeah.
upside down DC because prayer is how we're going to turn the city upside down. Thursday nights we do house of prayer. It's a prayer meeting, and we felt this prompting just a couple of weeks ago. Uh, we met a pastor in a church that had 70,000 of outstanding debt that was 2.1 million about 2 or 3 years ago, and we felt this prompting from the Lord: retire it for them, retire their debt.
Wow.
Well, I don't think you're making generosity moves like that if you don't have the revenue stream. So,
Agreed.
what's true personally is true organizationally. That God blesses us not to raise our standard of living, but to raise our standard of giving. So what we found is that these revenue streams then allow us to fund kingdom causes at like a whole nother level, and there's just so much joy in that. So thanks for letting me interrupt. And
No,
because here's what I'm believing for: just a ripple effect of generosity in the kingdom where churches are blessing other churches. It's not about the name over the church door, it's about the name above all names.
amen. We had a chance to do an event with the CFO at Chick-fil-A, and he said something I will never forget. And he said, "Without margin, there is no mission," and that has always stuck with me.
Ooh,
Right?
wow.
Not
Yeah,
bad. But no,
it's going in my journal.
but it's interesting because so many growing churches see this shift in a movement of reaching people to paying bills, and it almost always comes down to this multi-million-dollar building that turns into debt. And what I hear in your voice is, what does it look like if we had buildings that funded ministry and not just ministries that funded buildings? What would that do for the kingdom? What would that do for our ability to reach needs in our community? And so, for everyone listening, I don't want you to think that making money is a bad thing. It actually serves the community well in your church and your ability to be generous. So no, I love that story. I appreciate it. Um, PM, tell us a little bit too about the process. I was involved with you guys a little bit. Matt Johnson obviously did an incredible job. What kind of made you land on the childcare and on the event space as the two predominant uses for you?
Yeah, we exegeted our city and what are the real needs in real time. And the mayor of our city was saying that because DC is primarily double income, uh, you know, moms, dads working, that there was an extreme shortage of childcare space. And so we felt like, hey, if we're going to build out, state of the art kids facilities, why not use it Monday to Friday as a way of interfacing with our community? And so our good friend Frank Beeler and Faye's family came along, and we tag teamed on it. And so we revenue stream by leasing to them, and of course they revenue stream by doing what they do as a business. So that means our space gets used Monday to Friday, and then we flip it for our use on the weekend, and then we flip it back. So, I mean, Nathan, it just seems like good stewardship
Yes.
uh, on every level. And there are just a lot of opportunities for churches to turn into childcare providers, to turn into co-working
Yeah.
space,
Yeah.
to turn into event space. And so now what's interesting is it costs probably an additional 1 or 2 million in designing the childcare space because according to permits and codes in DC, you need more bells and whistles if it's a childcare provider. So it costs more money, but that will pay for itself in about 10 to 12 years and pay back everything we used to fund it. And then we get to do what we do on the weekend. So it is a win-win scenario.
It is, and I'll say this. Something just popped into my head. I remembered a story, Pastor Mark. One of the smartest things I think that was done in the process, and I got to again give Matt Johnson the credit. We had interviewed commercial real estate brokers, asked them what they think we should build, and Matt schedules an appointment with the head of the business improvement district in DC, right? And I go
Yep.
to the meeting with them, and the question was simply, "Hey, we have this space. We want to be great servants to the community. We don't want to just take from the community. What do you guys need here?" And we kind of already knew the answer, but just the fact that he asked and brought that person into the conversation. If you remember, PM, we left with the contact information of the head of the Navy Yard who said, "Hey, we need 150 childcare spaces tomorrow. If you build this, we'll put kids in it for you." And I just remember the genius of that, because not only did it bring approvals and help down the road when we ran into zoning issues and everything else, but Max moved there, got the full support of the Navy, the Business Improvement District, simply by asking, "How can we help?" And I just thought that was such
Yeah.
a brilliant move.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Yep.
I'm interviewing you, sorry, but I had to share that. I think,
Well, I think what you do is you find win-win when you meet needs that, uh, help out the local governments or authorities. That's a big deal. Like the mayor came out and cut the ribbon on our DC Dream Center, and and just to be honest, she should. Like we are going upstream, and we are discipling kids, and we're doing it in a ward that's underserved and under resourced. We're raising up hundreds of volunteers and building a $5 million building on our dime. And so, in other words, to say, hey, DC government, we're going to step in here and do some things because Jesus loves the little children,
yeah,
and we're gonna save some tax dollars in the process. So then some of the favorite events that we host here. I mean, we've had the First Lady here. We'll sometimes have Secret Service sweeping the building. That's when you know in this city that someone's coming over. That's like, okay.
yep,
Uh, but DC award night happened here. We hosted the chief of police and an event not long ago. So it makes you then a player in the city in a way that they see you as an asset and someone that's serving the city. And our MO, Nathan, is we're not trying to build a church. We're trying to bless a city to the third and fourth generation. And that's a little bit different mindset. And so that's a lot of what motivates what we do. And so for us, we talk about giving to missions, but it's also about rolling up your sleeves. This was probably 5 years ago, but at one point we were resettling about 60% of the refugees to the DC area,
wow,
just our church.
wow,
Um, we are probably making a bigger difference with friends experiencing homelessness than a lot of other organizations. We're very active in that space. Um, I think we might have had 30 volunteers last weekend with Angel Tree and our friends at Prison Fellowship as we help returning citizens. So this is about positioning yourself. And by the way, the next phase of this building is a mixed use marketplace, which
oh man,
maybe we'll touch on, but that's okay. And that's way past our pay grade. That's way beyond a coffee house. But part of the inspiration there is, can we create jobs? Can we, create opportunities for people that might have a hard time finding them otherwise? So, um, I just think that the church has more potential than what we
yeah,
think if we just get a little bit creative. Can I share one other philosophy of
please,
ministry piece?
yes, 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 yes,
So we see ourselves as in Acts 19 Athens church. And what I mean by that is Paul didn't boycott the Areopagus. He went in and competed for the truth in the marketplace of ideas. And so our whole philosophy is write better books, produce better films, draft better legislation, start better businesses. Michelangelo said, criticize by creating. And so let's quit throwing stones at culture. We know what's wrong. And listen, we live in a culture where it's wrong to say something is wrong, and I think that's wrong. So I'll go on record saying that. But we want to be more known for what we're for than what we're against.
Amen.
And so what brings us some of the greatest joy is dozens and dozens of nonprofits that have been started by entrepreneurs who breathe our air and drink our water. So do you know why we are not resettling as many refugees right now? Because someone started a nonprofit and they're doing the bulk of the work, but they came out of this ecosystem. And so I think churches thinking, outside just what has our name on it is important. And on that note, Dream Center doesn't have our name on it. We funded it. We paid every penny, but it doesn't have our name on it. And what that means is lots of churches do events and outreaches, and we want them to own it. Call it yours. It's yours. So I think that's another key piece of the puzzle in terms of how we present to the communities that we're in.
Absolutely. And I think the branding is genius, and simply in that what the message it sends to the community is that we're here for you. Like, this is not a church building we want you to come to. It's a building that we built for you to use. And I kind of want to narrow in on that. A couple interesting thoughts, and I'm a little excited here. Just Brian Chalette at Sandals Church said something that I thought was really profound. And he said, when a grandmaster is teaching a protege how to play chess, they will often take the queen off the table because it's the most versatile and powerful piece. If you want to learn how to play chess, it forces you to learn how to use all your pieces. And that essentially in COVID, what God did was he took our queen Sunday morning service off the table so that we could learn how to win with all of the other pieces of ministry. And I couple that with the study that Crossroads did that showed that there's 73 million people in America who are interested in Jesus and interested in Christian relationships, but would not go to a church building to get either. And most of those people are Gen Z. And so you're looking at your building not as a strategy, but as a tool for ministry. And you're mentioning the tens of thousands of people that are coming on site that probably wouldn't, most of them, come on 9 or 11 if they received a pamphlet in the mail. What has that done for National? Your relationships in the community, the ministry, you're connecting with new people. I mean, what has been the impact of that on the church?
Yeah. Well, we said in the very beginning, if we're going to go into the coffee business, you better be able, and this is 2006, before a lot of third wave coffee shops. The way we said it is if you can't compete with Starbucks in terms of product quality, stay under the porch. Don't get in the game if you can't do it well. So you do have to do what you do with a degree of excellence. I think it was Martin Luther said, Christian shoemakers, don't just put a cross on your shoes. Make great shoes, and those shoes will speak for themselves. So whatever we do, we want to do it with a level of excellence. And if I could kind of project into the future a little bit, what we're doing is creating parallel churches or parallel opportunities. So for example, this building, in fact, right below where my office is right now, imagine this. And again, I office for 16 years above Ebenezer's. So I was never more than a few steps from caffeine. The only thing that would be better is if there had been a fireman's pole from my office right down to the coffee bar. So I could get it like that. Well, give it 2 years and I'm going to be seated right above a sit down restaurant. And that sit down restaurant will corner one part of this building, and then we'll food hall, not over the past 10 years, Nathan, I have never gone to a food hall marketplace where I haven't taken notes. So Armature Works, Anaheim Packing House, Ponce City
Fun City.
Market,
Yeah.
Chelsea Market,
Yeah.
you name it. I am taking notes, including Union Market on the other side
Yeah.
of Capitol Hill. Well, we're
Beautiful.
going to compete with them, and we're going to create a place then where you can eat and work and play and pray. And where I'm going with that is those people will bump into us. They'll bump into. It's interesting. Someone walked into the building just a week ago and had like this visceral reaction. I was like, what was that? He said, I walked in and I felt like I was stabbed by joy. And he was tipping the cap to C.S. Lewis, who in his book Surprised by Joy talked about this moment as a child where he was stabbed by joy. And we've always felt like we anoint the door frames of our buildings, just saying, let there be a different presence here, that let the residue from House of Prayer, the residue from our weekend gatherings, let it be something that people bump into. Um, and so, um, I think there are people who might need to talk theology around a table instead of hearing it from a stage.
Hmm.
Now, the pastor part of me is like, man, I wish everybody would come and give me 30 minutes, and I'll try to give them Jesus. But let's be honest, give someone a uh, a meal and 30 minutes around the table, and that dialogue might be more meaningful, Nathan. And then depending on your theology, whether you believe Jesus turned water into grape juice or water into wine, add in the drink piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
And I just think it's this idea of thinking outside the box, creating conversations. And I don't think any of us is smart enough to figure this out. I think all of us are way past our pay grade. There's no crystal ball, but we've got to continue to incarnate the gospel. That's the hard work of the gospel, contextualizing into the love languages that people have. And most people, their love language, one of them is food. So
Amen.
why not create like
Yes.
15 food concepts and see what happens?
Well, and Pastor Mark, so something I don't want anybody to miss that's listening to this. Pastor Mark is not talking about starting a business, starting a food hall company, trying to run a restaurant while being the lead pastor of NCC. These are third-party operators, and it's one of my favorite terms called mailbox money. You go to the mailbox and there's money in it. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Here's the thing that excites me, like even 100 times more than that is you have a childcare operator, event company, 15 business owners whose livelihood depends on waking up every single morning and trying to get as many people as possible through their site. So you now have 20 people, smart business owners, who are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on marketing to do what? To get people on an NCC campus called the Capital Turnaround. You're not having to spend that money yourself. You're not having to rely on organic channels. You have 20 businesses marketing your facility for you. I think that's a beautiful thing.
And when we have gatherings, we're giving them a few thousand built-in customers. And when they draw their customers, they're giving us tens of thousands of leads.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it's this win-win that, in a perfect world, really creates kind of a virtuous cycle. And now I want to say for the record, though, like, yes, some of these things are past tense. We have done them. Ebenezer's, DC Dream Center, we own and operate the Miracle Theater. The marketplace concept, can I just say that the jury's out? We haven't done it yet.
Sure.
We're about to demo 30,000 square feet of
Wow.
space, and master plan is coming together. But we better check in 2 years, and we'll stub our toes. We'll make mistakes, but we'll try to learn along the way. And hopefully, in the process, this could prototype something for churches in the urban context. Now, we have a suburban campus, and I don't think we would do the marketplace there. We would probably do a sportsplex. We would probably have a different incarnation. But it's about every church just kind of exegeting cultural needs and then trying to figure out the best way to meet those and do it creatively and compassionately and good things happen. I love G.K. Chesterton. He
Okay.
said that when I discovered Christianity, I discovered that it had a rule and an order, but the chief aim of that order is to make room for good things to run wild. I love that. And so I feel like some of the businesses that we start, the things that we do, like let's just give room for good things to run wild.
Gosh, I love that so much. You know, and not to repeat some things we've said in the past, but the opportunity today to do this is unique because of COVID and the increase of price, and other industries have been impacted. They're looking for more cooperative spaces, if you will, and the churches as well. And I think PM, there's probably a lot of people watching this, and they're watching it because they're really interested in this. We're answering the question of, is it possible? I think you've established that, and is it beneficial? But man, if there's a church out there that's looking at this and wanting to serve their community based on the good things that happened to you, based on you stubbing your toes a few times, what are just a couple what's a couple points of advice that you'd want to give to some leaders who are thinking about this as an opportunity?
I think the first thing I would want to say is that 15 years ago, none of this was possible.
Mm,
15 years into our life as a church, there weren't any major gifts. There weren't any we had Ebenezer's, but that's a pretty small footprint.
sure.
There wasn't any indication that God would do on the scale that he's doing. So the first thing I would say is dream big, pray hard, and think long. Like who knows what God might want to do in and through you. And then it is going to require some risk, and risk necessitates some failure because success is well managed failure. So you're not going to get it right every time. But the other thing is, I've always been well, you can see behind me. I mean, I read 3,000 books before I wrote one. I'm a conference junkie. I hack other people's habits. I do reconnaissance. Everywhere I go, I'm studying how they're doing what they're doing. Um, I still haven't been able to crack the Chick-fil-A code though, since you brought them up. How do they do those drive-throughs with like 10,000 cars that streamline and circle the
Do you want to
building
know?
like Jericho? It's a mystery.
Do you want to know? It
I
is.
do want to know.
I will never forget this as long as I live. So, average fast food restaurant in America grosses 700,000. McDonald's is number two at 2.6 million. Chick-fil-A is at $7 million per store pre-COVID. Okay, the lobby
Wow.
experience was the key, and that was taken off. And despite that fact, their revenue per store grew during COVID to $11 million, while everyone else was going out of business.
Wow.
So they sat inside of a boardroom, Pastor Mark. This is literally from the chief marketing officer at Chick-fil-A. They sat in a boardroom and they said, "We do not have the answer. We do not know how to solve this, but our operators do." So they put out a competition amongst the operators and said, who can come up with the creative idea? And at the time, the most cars they ever had through a drive-through in an hour were 172. Within 3 weeks, they were at 400. And within a month and a half, someone cracked 700 cars in an hour.
No.
And then
No.
that idea came back to corporate and they shared it with everyone in the company. And now Chick-fil-A, that's how they grew to 11 million per store during COVID. How beautiful is that?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
I'm always saying I'd rather have one God idea than 1,000 good ideas.
sure.
That kind of sounds like a God idea. Um, but it's just leave it to Chick-fil-A. And by the way, it's not ice cream, it's ice dream.
Okay.
I love their ice cream. We've got a few operators at NCC, and in fact, I think we're hosting a Chick-fil-A, some operators this fall right here
Awesome.
at the Capitol turnaround. So here's the bottom line. What I was getting at was reconnaissance, right? Like just
Mhm.
learn from everybody. So on that note, open invite. If you're in DC for a spring break, or you're doing your patriotic duty visiting the nation's capital, or you have an eighth grader. By the way, the population of eighth graders in DC in the months of April and May are like, bam. It's like a city of eighth graders because everybody comes on their school trip.
That's
So
amazing.
if you're listening and you want to pop over, one of my favorite things to do is give a tour. And Nathan, let's host another gathering. You've brought
Yes.
leaders here, and so there's nothing like show and tell. I never outgrew show and tell, and I love going to other churches, and we certainly love welcoming other churches who want to come and visit here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna for sure take you up on that. Um, so, Pastor Mark, when I met you, I think I told you this. I think you're one of the biggest visionaries that I've ever had the pleasure of being around. But what I learned about you, I think your superpower is your curiosity. It's contagious, man. Um, I
Hey, I sorry, I keep expanding on your it, but when I was 20, no, when I was 21, I read an 800-page biography of Albert Einstein. In fact, it's right here. It sits in a special
wow,
place. Can we take a
sure.
field trip together?
Let's take a
I
field
don't
trip.
I don't think it's gonna I don't think it, and you can see how casual I dress
I like it. I
on
like it.
my office days. So 800-page biography of Albert Einstein, and page 755 changed my life. It changed my life. Albert Einstein said, never lose a holy curiosity. Um,
Oh,
and that actually is painted on Main Street on the wall of the Capitol turnaround.
oh, come on.
And people wouldn't necessarily know the backstory. We wanted something that anybody could be inspired by, and so that's one of the quotes that we have up on the wall. But I'll just say one more thing. It actually was my wife and I. We both have counselors individually, together. Like during COVID, I had to get some counseling for some grief because every leader experienced loss. And but it was in a recent counseling session that our counselor said, and she's a systems therapist, so it's kind of Dr. Murray Bowen, who I actually studied in grad school.
Okay.
He said what makes a great mother, but I think it goes for fathers too, is non-anxious curiosity. That's it.
Yeah, and to answer your question, PM, that's why we do the events that we do. I mean, if Target can sell $90 billion of perishable goods to the same people that we're trying to reach with the imperishable message of Jesus Christ, I want to know everything that they know. So that is, you're right. Yeah, we share that value. So hey, PM, I could
Love
literally
it.
talk to you for 4 more hours. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you making the time for this. I know it's going to bless a ton of churches who are thinking about this and looking at this, but man, just to see God's hand on you and the church, and even having even just having a view of what God was doing through you during that time, man, is just so cool. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hey, well, Nathan, thanks for standing in the gap. Thanks for doing what you do. And anybody who made it to the very end of our conversation, tip of the cap to you, because that was a long but fun
Yeah.
conversation,
Yes.
and look forward to the next one.
All right, Pastor Mark. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for staying with us, and we'll look forward to talking with you again soon.